Areena.
This week we try to find out why Finland is seeing a surge in the number of children being diagnosed with ADHD. Hello and welcome back once again to All Points North. I'm Ronan Browne.
And I'm Zena Iovino. Today we're asking why so many kids in Finland have ADHD. And that's not an exaggerated statement, because in some parts of the country, like in North Karelia, more than 1/5 of school-age boys have a diagnosis.
Yeah, and it may have gone under people's radars to some extent, but Finland has really seen a dramatic rise in the number of ADHD diagnoses among children over the past, say, 5 to 10 years.
Not long ago, ADHD was commonly seen as a condition that only affected hyperactive little boys, the ones who couldn't sit still and were always getting into trouble. Today, we know that ADHD can affect people of all ages and genders, and diagnoses are rising across nearly every age group. But in Finland right now, the increase is especially evident among young boys.
Yeah, it is. And we will come to that. But before we get into the numbers and the details, it might be worth just taking a minute to remind our listeners of exactly what ADHD is. So, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is a neurodevelopmental condition, and that means it negatively affects the development of a person's nervous system. ADHD typically begins in childhood and often continues into adulthood.
It's generally characterized by patterns of inattention, hyperactivity, and impulsivity that can interfere with daily life, whether that's in school or at home. Some kids may struggle more with focusing and staying organized, while others might have trouble sitting still or managing their impulsive behavior. Many experience a combination of all these symptoms.
Yeah, so that's the condition on a more general level, but let's focus now on Finland, and here are some stats. Over 11% of boys between the ages of 7 and 12, so that's primary school age boys, have now received an ADHD diagnosis. And that compares to just 3.3% back in 2015. So from 3.3 to over 11 in about a decade. It's a almost four-fold increase.
And when you drill deeper into these figures, you can see some pretty shocking regional differences.
Yeah, you really can. Like you mentioned North Karelia there at the top of the show. In that region, which is in the east of Finland, 21.5% of boys aged 7 to 12 had now been diagnosed with ADHD. So in any one of that region's primary school classrooms, 1 in 5 of the boys in that classroom has an ADHD diagnosis. And just to put that figure into some kind of further context, the equivalent figure for the EU is somewhere around 5 to 6%. And that's considered an issue in itself across the continent, yet the rate of diagnosis is about 4 or 5 times higher in North Karelia.
And in working on this episode, we learned that it's not just the younger kids showing this uptick.
Yeah, that was surprising too, because among teenage boys, ADHD diagnoses have also surged. So 10 years ago, just 2.4% of boys in this age group had been diagnosed with the condition. That number has now jumped to 9.5.
So again, we're talking about a 4-fold increase in less than a decade.
Yeah, the numbers are really quite shocking. But while the number of children diagnosed has multiplied, so has the prescribing of medication to treat the condition. Finland's Social Benefits Agency Kela said earlier this year that the use of ADHD medications has almost tripled in the past 5 years, with over 115,000 people receiving this Kela compensation last year. So I guess all of this brings us back to the question of the day, or the question of this episode. Why are so many kids in Finland being diagnosed with ADHD now?
Well, the short answer is it's complicated. Here's one of Finland's foremost experts in the field, Terhi Aalto-Setelä of the Finnish Institute for Health and Welfare, THL.
Actually, there is no clear or simple answer for the rise. First, there is a better awareness of ADHD both among the population and also in healthcare. And we know more about ADHD now, and healthcare professionals are better at recognizing ADHD. And ADHD is also talked about a lot in the media, increasing general awareness of ADHD. But I think even more important factors are the big changes in kids and teens environments in recent years, like more screen time and less physical activity and less sleep. And this evidently contributes a lot to the increase of ADHD diagnosis. And what is good in this is naturally early identification, which means better possibilities for support and treatment, and they can improve quality of life and school performance of those diagnosed with ADHD. Also, this increased awareness of ADHD in society can reduce stigma and improve understanding of ADHD. But what is concerning is overdiagnosing ADHD or the possible risk for overdiagnosing, which I think is happening right now. There's a risk of diagnosing ADHD far too easily or falsely, which both can lead to young people receiving an ADHD diagnosis even if they don't actually have the disorder. And also, it seems that it's often, very, very often leads to unnecessary medication. Because the ADHD-like symptoms might actually be due to something else, another mental health issue like depression or anxiety or trauma or behavioral disorder. And they can also be caused by not enough sleep or lack of physical activity or too much screen time. And sometimes these symptoms might come from undiagnosed learning difficulties, which make it hard for the child to focus on schoolwork. And false diagnosis can then affect their self-esteem.
What's going on in North Korea when 1 in 5 or more than 1 in 5 boys there have a diagnosis? Do you think that reflects reality, or is there something else at play?
Both. Yeah, I think these huge variations in these prevalence rates, they are a problem, evidently a problem. And we know that there's regional variation in morbidity in general. And compared to other parts of the country in Finland, North Korea and Eastern Finland generally report more mental health and substance abuse problems, as well as more somatic illnesses. And the accumulation of various risk factors like socioeconomic risk factors, financial difficulties, and poverty is also more common there. And these factors increase the risk of family problems, and they may affect how well parents can cope with their kids, and so, which then impacts children and young people. And there are also genetic differences in morbidity. They certainly play some role here, but we don't know how big. But they don't explain the whole picture. But also, there are differences in the availability and quality of services between counties. Early childhood education, school, family services, social services, and healthcare. And to understand the reasons behind such large differences in prevalence rates, we need to examine the functioning of the entire service chain, not just focus on a single factor.
In terms of the school environment, what are some of the best ways to support students who have ADHD?
First, the school environment should be such that it doesn't make the symptoms even worse. I mean, these very open spaces are not good for this kind of kids. They have hard to concentrate and study there. And then maybe if the groups are too big, it makes it difficult to concentrate. And it will be very important that these kids and young people could have possibility to have an own seat and walls in the classroom, and the teacher that instructs what to do and gives help when they need.
And there we heard from Terhi Aalto-Setelä, a chief physician at the Public Health Authority, THL.
Yeah, and as Terhi explained there, ADHD isn't caused by one single thing, but it can be due to a mix of different factors from genetic to neurological to environmental. And the environmental factor has been very much in the news in Finland over the past few months, particularly in relation to schools.
Yes, Terhi mentioned more structure in class and a more traditional approach to teaching could be beneficial. But I think you're thinking of screens in schools, aren't you?
I am indeed, yeah. Well, Finland's government has been working for months on introducing a bill that would effectively ban mobile phones and other such devices from Finnish classrooms. We actually discussed this very topic on an episode of the podcast last year. But this week, that bill moved even further towards becoming a law when Parliament's Education Committee gave it a green light.
So, what would it mean if the bill becomes law?
Well, generally, it would mean that kids in both primary and secondary schools would not be allowed to use their phones at all during lessons, and it would be up to each individual school to decide if or how the phones might be used outside of lessons, like during break times or during lunchtime. The only exception to this bill, or if this law comes in, and the only exception would be if a teacher allows the kids to use their phones for some reason, such as educational activity or for some health reason.
So, ultimately, it sounds like the goal is to cut down on distractions and help pupils focus and concentrate.
Yeah, exactly that. And that's what the government has said that their aim is. And this week also, telecoms firm DNA said the number of children in Finland with their very own phone has dropped quite significantly.
What age are we talking about here?
Well, actually, they were talking about kids from the age of 5 to 7.
Well, that's very young.
Well, it is very young, but this is Finland, and kids do tend to get their own phone at a younger age than in many other countries, as we well know.
So there seems to be a growing awareness around the negative impacts of smartphone use on young children. I suppose time will tell whether this is part of a pushback that's been building for years or just a reactionary trend in response to recent public debates.
Yeah, but actually getting back to the main theme of today, where can families, and I mean by that both parents and children, get help to manage the effects of ADHD? I'd say there is definitely help out there, but many people probably don't know where to turn.
Well, one place to start is the ADHD Association of Finland for peer support and information. I talked to their executive director, Katja Suni. I asked her how families can get started if they suspect their child's concentration problems are more than the usual developmental hurdles.
There is a wide range of support available to address the individual challenges of functioning with ADHD. And there is, you can get the support from the public sector, for example, from the child health clinic or in school health care, or maybe in early childhood education or from the school. And of course, there's then the third sector, like from the associations. There you can get peer support. Also, I think it's important to understand that it's important to get the support also before you get the diagnosis. So if there is, if you are concerned that if there's something that maybe my child could have ADHD, so right then you need to talk to, for example, about it in school or daycare or in the child health clinic, so that you can get the information and then the support for you and your family and your child.
And there we heard from Katja Suni of the ADHD Association of Finland on where to go if you need help or support dealing with an ADHD diagnosis.
At the same time, we should mention that the scientific community is not all on the same page about ADHD. For a lot of people, symptoms can be manageable when their environment plays to their strengths. Some learners may struggle in a noisy classroom but excel at something else.
Yeah, that's very true. And it's also true that there is a growing understanding of neurodiversity today. But before we move on from this section, a quick reminder that we always want to hear what you think about the topics we cover here on All Points North. Here's how to get in touch.
You can join the conversation too. We want to hear what's on your mind. Just leave us a voice note or text on WhatsApp. Our number is +358 44 421 0909.
Okay, so we have been very focused on the podcast recently on the 2 elections that Finland just held, so we haven't had much time to remind listeners of our Ask Us Anything section that we brought in at the start of this year.
So let's do just that. If you have a question or a query about Finnish news, Finnish politics, sports, or anything at all, please send it to us and we will do our best to find the answer for you.
Yeah, and we have had some great questions since we started this section that have led to some very interesting debates here in the office, as well as some good discussions on the podcast. So if you do have a question, you know what to do. And now for a quick roundup of what else has been making the headlines in Finland this week. And we start with the big news of the week, which was the government's announcement of its budget plans for the second half of its 4-year term in office. Following 2 days of talks, Petteri Orpo's administration revealed a slew of tax cuts, which included one for high earners as well as one for companies, with Finland's rate of corporate tax dropping from 20% to 18%. Now, these reductions in state revenue will be counterbalanced by cuts to development aid, municipal spending and higher education, among other areas.
And these budget adjustments are coming against the backdrop of difficult times for the Finnish economy. This week, we reported that a record number of Finnish businesses closed down last year. Some 44,000 companies in Finland shuttered during 2024, which is a significant increase on the figure of 31,000 from the previous year. Not only that, but the trend has continued into this year, as bankruptcies were up 50% during the first quarter of 2025.
And all of this is having knock-on effects elsewhere in Finnish society, as a report by Kela this week revealed that 1 in 3 young adults in Finland are at risk of falling into poverty. This rate was higher than almost every other country included in the comparative international study, aside from Denmark.
Meanwhile, another report released this week issued a warning that Finland's forestry sector faces a severe shortage of skilled labor, and the industry itself is under threat unless more workers can be recruited from abroad. The report by Tapio, a forestry management and consultancy firm, suggested that the Finnish government invest in short-term vocational training for seasonal workers and also offer training courses in English.
And in travel news, the number of people flying from Finland to the United States has dropped by 9% ever since Donald Trump entered the White House for his second term in office. This is part of a wider trend across Europe, with travel from Germany down 28% and from Iceland 35%.
Getting back to Finland, the country's bear population has grown at a rate of 10 to 20% in recent years. That's according to figures published this week by Natural Resources Institute Finland. The country is home to some 2,400 bears now as a result of Finnish authorities tightening hunting rules.
And finally, one of the stranger articles we published over on Yle News this week, but also one of the most read, included advice from the Association of Finnish Cities and Municipalities on what to do during a power cut. The association said people should not use the toilet if electricity is out for a long period of time and should instead use a large bucket. This is because, the association said, a prolonged power outage would cripple the country's water and sewage systems, and flushing your toilet would not be advisable. So, Zena, what do you think about that one?
Well, I appreciate your question. I guess I have to say I hope we don't have to find out firsthand.
That's true. My only thought is I wonder if that's why all the political parties were handing out all those free buckets before the election last time.
The weekend is almost here, and you know what that means. Time to recharge, maybe binge watch a little. Any special plans, Ronan?
Well, I'm sorry to be a football bore here, Zena, but I will be hoping that Liverpool win the Premier League title this weekend. It's happened just 3 times in my almost 40 years as a fan of this particular football club. So it would be really nice to see them make it 4 this weekend. And I guess I'll try and fit in some time with family and friends around that more important event. but how about you?
You know me, probably a mix of laundry, leftovers, and pretending I'll go for a run. But I might squeeze in a movie night.
All right, I'm glad you said that, because I do have a recommendation for you from our favourite streaming platform, Yle Arena, of course. It's actually quite a coincidental title for this movie, given the topic of this week's podcast, but The Kids Are All Right is a film from 2010 about a non-traditional family, and it's a bit of light viewing for those who might need it.
That title does tie in pretty nicely with the whole theme of this week's show, doesn't it? And that's a wrap for us this week, I believe.
It is indeed, yeah. But before we go, a reminder that Finland will be celebrating Vappu, or May Day, next week. So All Points North will be out partying on Wednesday evening before eating donuts and drinking Zena in a freezing cold park on Thursday morning, as is the tradition in this part of the world. Or maybe not, let's see. But we will be back in 2 weeks. But before we go, thanks to our audio engineer today, Mikko Kymäläinen, for putting the show together, and to you for listening to and supporting All Points North. That's all for this week. Bye.
Bye.